Very good evening, everyone. I'm Shrija, working as a community manager with DCKAP. And first of all, thank you so much, everyone, for registering to today's Magento Master Virtual Series. And DCKAP has been actively organizing like Magento Meetup for more than 5 years. So we just thought like, however, during the lockdown, so I believe like that has been affected more than a quarter of the world population. So we were looking for some other means to organize the meetup. So our idea was to open Magento Masters and ask them to share their insights with people across the globe through the virtual meetup. So I believe our first virtual meetup happened at April, 2 months ago. So it was indeed a great success. So we have hosted around like 5 Magento series, including today's series. So that spirit made us think, why not facilitate such meetups frequently with all the Magento fraternity support? And here we are. All you know, like Magento Master Virtual Series is a bi-weekly event, especially for the Magento community across the industry. And this is our fifth webinar in this series. And thank you so much for. I would like to thank the today's speaker, Lyzun, for accepting our invitation. And also, I would like to grab this opportunity to give you guys a brief intro about DCKAP and how we as a community are contributing to the Magento as well as the whole e-commerce fraternity. Um, okay. So, no, DCKAP have like 15 years of experience in the industry. We have developed a handful of products that allows brands and businesses to unleash their full potential. And our product suite include Productimize, a product customization platform, a Chorus, an automated integration tool between ERP, CRM, and e-commerce stores, friend, and FlexiPIM, a product information management platform, and QATouch, a smart test management platform. All that said, I don't want to hold you guys from hearing out the capitative session by the wonderful speaker lined up for the day. I'm sure that you will have a great learning experience tonight. And I believe like it's my privilege to introduce the speaker. Oleksandr Lyzun is the Magento technical team lead working with comwrap and joined the company in 2015, I believe. And in the last 12 years of working with Magento, he developed, he lead and put live numerous Magento products. As Magento community maintainer, Magento DevDocs maintainer, and Magento master, he is a 2x Magento master as well, 2019 and 2020 in a series. He works with passion and love on various Magento community projects. And I believe like today he's here to give an intro about bulk API in Magento 2. So I hope like everyone have an insightful session. And once again, thank you, Lyzun, for accepting our invitation. And over to you.
Thank you very much. Looks like after your words, looks like I'm a nice guy. So yeah, I want to tell you today a little bit about the project which I'm working on last 1.5 years approximately. I'll try to share my screen now. Tell me if you see it.
Yes, we can see. Yeah.
Cool. So yeah, the project which I'm working last 1.5 years is basically the asynchronous Magento. It's not called API exactly. API is just one branch of this global project. So wait, okay, yeah, like this. So you basically already told about everything about me, so I just will skip in this one, and we'll go directly to the goal of our today's meeting. So first of all, it's synchronous API. I guess you all know that Magento has a REST API, like a backend API, which provide the full coverage of the whole Magento features. I mean, I would not say 100% coverage, but quite like big part of it. And this API is widely used and is basically developed also for the front end. It's also used by Luma partially if you go to the checkout pages, for example. But this API has a really big like negative side effects. Oh, wait, like this. And that's one of examples. Which one? It's working fine if you send in requests and waiting for the answers of those requests. But if you will start to use the API more intensively, for example, if Magento is only part of some bigger system, not only like standalone e-commerce shop, but if you have also your different ERP systems which connected to the system, you may start to use API more intensively. And from this step, you will start to send much more requests as usual to the system. And on my experience and why this project basically was born, that we had a Magento system which was connected to ERP system, and this ERP is imported the product data to the Magento, and then customer can buy it. And this import was done in a way that the product prices and stock were updated instantly. So, and it's happening during each second quite a lot of times, because there are a lot of also another sales channel, not only Magento one. And for everything was used, first of all, REST API, and second one, all requests were sent simultaneously. So the ERP is not waited for the answers. Just if he get update for those 100 products, he send them in one pack, like one after another. There was delay, maybe 1 second between, or even less than a second. But the operation time for the execution is took much more than a second. And you can see if you start, let's say, from one request, it took approximately 5 seconds for like clean Magento instance with disabled cache. I mean, that was just test cases. But if you will start, if you will go to, let's say, 340, you can see that for one request, it took approximately 23 seconds to execute. So amount was grown tremendously. And another basically problems or issues that we faced with, that was Magento start to throw up the deadlocks. So basically, if you will try to save 100 products and you will send this to the usual REST API almost at the same time, I'm not saying there's the same millisecond, but with a short gap in between, the system start to throw back the deadlocks. That's happened by the reason that when you are sending a request to Magento, it started, let's say, product creation. It started to save the product data. It started to update the images, updating the stock, prices, and this all touching a lot of tables in the system. And for example, if you have a big image set for each product, then the request is opening the image table for writing, then write the data. So it's opening, then start to save the pictures on the file system, write to the table, and then close it in the end. If you will try to send multiple products, when the first request open this table for writing, and at the same time, the second request trying to do the same, is getting back the deadlock. So, and then you see 500 error back, and you cannot save any products. Or at least particularly, a lot of requests are just gone. Also, it's because Magento is a super complex system, the performance of multiple requests is getting worse and worse. I mean, the more requests you send, the slower your system become, and not only the backend. So we're not talking only about the API response, but we're also talking about the general Magento frontend behavior, because your server is getting overloaded. One more is that the system always have to stay online during those operations. I mean, if you send 1,000 products for update, your system always have to wait for response from those updates if you want to handle correctly the whole statuses and to manage all correctly on your ERP system. That's how the idea of asynchronous processing came up. And yes, in the title, it was announced will stay only bulk API, but I will talk today not only about the bulk API, but also about asynchronous API, which is basically part of it. So the bulk API in Magento is always asynchronous, but asynchronous API is not a bulk API still. And yeah, this idea basically came from these cases which I explained you before, and it was like, why cannot we just send a request to Magento and close the connection and Magento handle everything when it's a good time for the system or the good time for the environment? So to achieve this functionality, we needed to have some, basically we have to use some core features. We don't want to develop everything from the beginning, and Magento, thanks God, had already the queuing functionality. it was available as Magento 2.1, but only in commerce. So that's why I guess a wide range of the community never heard about this. I also honestly never heard about this till 2.2. So I skipped the whole major version update without knowing what is Magento message queue framework is. And this message queue framework is providing the basically possibility of the synchronous process of the request. I'm not talking about the API request, any request which you will send to this framework. It has a support for database queues and for the RabbitMQ or IMQP connections. And by default, basically it was used only for the shared catalogs in Magento B2B. There was only use case till 2.3 version. So there was like big gap when the Magento message queue framework was provided or announced. It existed in a core, but it was not really used. And yeah, this was a DB queues was a default. And if you want to use RabbitMQ, you have to establish connection to RabbitMQ. But what is nice that it's existed there and available out of box, so we can easily use the Magento message queue framework for our goals. And our goals was to create a synchronous and bulk API, but we also didn't want, I mean, you can imagine if Magento has thousands of endpoints, and if you want to make them asynchronous, we don't want to create 1,000 new service contracts, and we don't want to create 1,000 new implementation of the request. So the idea was that we just will use existed REST API. And we basically end up with this diagram. I will try to go more in details here. So what we made, we use the REST API and we build one more layer on top of it. So originally we have, let's say, endpoints which named product creation or customer creation, or this post product, post customer. And we added one more layer on it. So all requests sent to the Magento were dispatched by the controller, which catching the all request on the API endpoints. No matter is it asynchronous, is it Swagger request maybe, or is it just a usual REST API. There is dispatcher, which is defining basically, is it request asynchronous or not? If it's not asynchronous, if you're using the standard REST API, then the standard service contract is executed. And then you basically just have a standard Magento API. If the request is asynchronous, then the more complex operations are executed. There's new operation created in database that's basically used for the tracking the time. Oh, so sorry, for tracking the status of the operations. Then there is much shadower module, or not module, the model which is publishing the operations. They send to the queue, and then they lie in a queue and waiting. So that's basically, I also explain more or less the standard message queue workflows. And there is some consumer, which is basically the implementation which working with those messages, and it's picking up the message from the queue, and then it defines which service contract to execute. So we didn't basically develop the new implementations. We only added one more layer, which is not execute directly the service contracts, which is put all messages into the queue first, and then another worker take it and only then execute service contract. That allow us that with the cases which I explained before, when let's say when the ERP system is sending simultaneous requests to the Magento system, not to execute them all directly, but put them in a queue and they execute them one by one, which is lead to more safe execution, and we know that all operations will be executed correctly, and if not, we can always get the status of them. So the first was develop asynchronous API. The asynchronous and bulk, as I told, it's a bit too different. First was done asynchronous API, which basically covered the whole post, put, page, or delete request of the standard Magento REST API, and it's basically worked only by adding new part in the URL, which is async in this case. If you will add async to any of those requests, the request will be automatically converted to asynchronous request. Here's no page example because Magento currently don't have any page implementations out of box, but it's also supporting if you will decide to build your own. And then you will get a response. So, but response will not be status of the executing your operation. It will be the status of accepting the message. So the web API controller, he's basically will apply the validation rules on the request. Let's say if you send in the products API endpoint, it will validate your schema, but then it just will take the message and put it into the queue. And after that, you will get only the UID back of your operation. So this means that the operation basically is delayed currently. So the operation execution is delayed currently. And it will be executed sometime later, and then you can request the status of this operation. So you'll get the basically bulk UID back. That's your identifier. And then you will see the request items that basically, if we're talking about the asynchronous operation, that's always single operation. So all these request items always will be one there. And if there's an error, you basically usually will see or an exception from Magento, or you will see the error here. Then we thought, okay, I mean, asynchronous API is awesome. Now we can execute all operations asynchronously. So we solved the problem with system overload if the system sends too many requests. But the main phrase or main words in this sentence, system sends too many requests. And this part, we also decided that we want to improve it. I mean, why the hell we have to send so many requests for let's say updating the products? Yeah, I understand that's 1,000 of products, but why cannot we pack them together because they all have the same structure? That's how the bulk API came up. So yeah, we again extend URL. Why not? That's the easiest way to do. We added to async, we added bulk. So then now system know that this request is a bulk. But in a body request, for example, we pack in the all objects together. So this technically means if you want to send 1,000 products to update, you send in only one request to Magento and pack all your products object like an array in one request. Like for me, sounds quite cool. And on response, you will get basically exactly the same response as you had on asynchronous operation, but there will be more items. So basically, you will have this request item will contain all the items you used before with the statuses of each of them. There also will be transferred the data hash. That's a data hash SHA-256 of your body request. It's not, I can tell you it's not used in Magento Core. It's provided, but it's not used. It was provided by the reason that maybe some ERP system integrators want to validate that the request correctly came. That's also can be done by security reasons. If you, let's say, working with a checkout or with the orders import, so you want to be sure that your request came correctly without modification. So that's basically one possibility for security improvement if you integrate the Magento with another systems. Yeah, but let's say, for example, if we have the put request, yeah, what to do with parameters? So if we have the put request, that's a default Magento, let's say which has an ID in a URL, that's, for example, update the category information. If you transfer in the array, you can understand that those ID can be a lot of. So technically, if you will update 100 categories, you have to transfer 100 of different IDs, and you definitely cannot pack it in a URL. What then we done? We basically replace this parameters with prefix by, and then next letter come like uppercase. And that was done just to, again, not to change the URLs and make them easy to implement. And this parameter was moved inside of the body request. So if you're talking about the categories, product, whatever, which has a parameter in a URL, the parameter is coming inside. And this allowed for the system to know for each category ID this put request. Basically, also, it's not only looks easy, it's only easy to implement if you will try to implement the bulk ID. Let's have a look at a more complex example. We have two parameters here. Let's say if you update in the option of the configurable product, we have SKU and we have an ID. And right, so we basically what we are doing is you can predict, we are replacing the double dot with the by prefixes, put in the first letter uppercase, and that's how our URL for bulk request will look like. And then the ID, sorry, I see an error here, by the way. I have to be a sync bulk prefix in the beginning of this. I will fix it. And yeah, and then our data, let's say SKU and ID, they come in inside of the body request. Okay, you get basically, let's go back. I'll just to let you know what I'm talking about. We have this bulk UID. It looks like this, a long string, some numbers, letters inside. What to do with it? I mean, yeah, I send a request. I have no idea what is with my operation is going on. Then I can get a status for this operation. So basically, I'm just asking, hey, Magento, tell me what is going on with my request with ID like this. And you will get back such a detailed information, which is basically originally stored in Magento database. You will get, again, your bulk UID, you will get a description. So you know for each operation, is this executed? You have a start time of the operation. You have a user ID who executed this operation. It can be different. Don't mix it. So we have in Magento backend 4 users types which can execute operations and they're all checked correctly. So we have an admin user, we have integration user, we have customer. So because bulk API not only the backend, like it's called backend API, but it also can be executed by customers. If let's say have some feature built on the front end, like update the customer data, you can put it in a synchronous way. And we have guests, which are also may have some operations. Let's say you can make the products save operation public if you want to. I would not recommend to do it, but there is a switcher in Magento backend. Don't tell anybody. Yeah, and if you want to like more detailed status, you can make simple detailed status request data, and this also will contain the result serialized data. This parameter you can see here. It's basically the parameter or the value which is represent what the execution of your request is produced. So for example, if you know the standard Magento REST API, when you send the product to the REST API, you will get back the product body. So there will be the JSON output there. By the way, it's not CQRS pattern, so we just tried to now be implemented in Magento Core, but it's still there. So, and when you're executing the bulk operations, you sometimes, if let's say you send a request, it was successfully executed, but your customer is telling, hey, I still don't see the price updated. Where is my price update? Then basically you can request the status for this operation, and the result serialized data, you can see the information of what was saved on the database, and then detect if let's say the problem is somewhere on a save or it's somewhere on, let's say, represented on the front end, the prices, or in the indexer. So, but that still make your way to debug a little bit easier. Then you also see there's a result message here, which is also like part of the detailed information, which will tell you if there was an error and which error. So if Magento reported it or it was successfully executed. So in this, let's say, example, which I have here, that wasn't executed with an error, and you see that the customer with the same email address already exists in associated website. So that's again make you easier. Okay, so there's an issue, I can fix it, so and so. Also, as part of this project, there was provided the asynchronous Swagger. So if you like to use Swagger for testing, you're welcome. You can basically just use the default Magento Swagger at -- type async in the URL, and then it will be loaded and you can use it. That's out of box there. Use it if you want to. Then fortunately, no bulk API Swagger, which is basically to implement. Currently, there are no interest from the community to doing it, but if somebody want to support here and want to also contribute a little bit, you can just pin me in the Slack, and we can definitely take this. So road synonyms, so that was also part of our project, which is basically also part of the bulk API. What is it doing? It's providing you possibility to replace the default Magento roads with something fancy. So for example, if we have here on this example, async v1 products, method post, it can be replaced with just async products. Then your API request will look like post/async products. Why it was done? Again, by the same reason that we provided the API changes, and if you want that merchants, your ERP system will easier switch to the new implementation. They can then the developers can just make the aliases for the old URLs, and then ERP system don't need to do anything. So that's again making integration much easier. And yeah, that's basically just a couple of examples. So let's say in this case, /create widgets will call this endpoint v1/widgets. That's for standard API. That's part for the bulk API and for the products. So basically, you can define any aliases you want to. Yeah, that was for this. Basically, was provided a new XML configuration file web API async, which you can create in your module and basically just use. Till I'll switch to this one. One more note is the bulk and async API not only covering the Magento APIs, it's also covering any other custom implementations. So basically, if for your module, you provided the API coverage, then you have to know that it's automatically available like bulk and like async. You don't need to do anything at all. So Magento will make it works. So working with queues. So basically we publish our message. This message appear into the queue and then consumer have to pick it up. So what is going on here and how to manage this? How to make it work? That's more. First of all, you have to enable IMQP for the async and bulk APIs. It's happening quite easy. In your environment PHP file, you have to add this section which name queue. Then have to be IMQP block here, and then you define in the parameters to connect to your queuing system. Quite important note, as I told you before, there is database queues in Magento and RabbitMQ queues. Database queues are not supported by bulk and async API. So be careful here. You always need RabbitMQ to use those APIs. I will repeat myself. This task is also in to-do list. And if somebody wanna make this works, again, ping me on Slack, or here is a Twitter handle or on the top of the screen. So just drop me a message. Okay, for not repeat myself again, if you want to support or contribute in any part of the async bulk APIs, in general, asynchronous Magento, just drop me some message, and we definitely will find some stuff where you can try your skills. So Magento has a batch list of the consumers which can be run. If you just will execute the command like bin Magento queue consumer list, you will see that's list of the available consumers in 2.3.5 version, in commerce, B2B, and community edition. So that's basically all consumers list. Consumer, which is interesting for us, that's this last one. It's async operation all. It's covering the full Magento async and bulk requests. And you can easily start it by run bin Magento queue consumer start, and then defining the consumer name. So basically you can start any consumer like this, but as we're talking about the asynchronous API, then we will work with this example here. Also, there's another way to start it. So that's one example. If you'll start it, it's starting the process, and this process is listening for connection for the basically queue. If there are no messages in queue, you just open and block in your terminal, so you cannot do anything else if you start it just in terminal, this command. There is another way to start it, and that's basically a recommended way if you're using it in production environment. In your environment PHP file, you have to add the consumer runner section. And then all your consumers will be executed by cron job. So basically the cron job will pick up the consumer which we will define on the section consumers, consumers, and will execute them. And then they will be run as a process. And so the next cron will check if the consumer is running, then do nothing. If it's not running, then run it. They also can define max messages, which can be executed after this one consumer is terminating himself. And then the next one will be run with the next cron job. By the way, in this example, which I drop you, they will never be run because cron none here is false. So it has to be true here. That's, as I told, more recommended way if you're working with production systems. How does basically consumer know which messages to process and how we publish in messages to the queues? There is a topic exchange. That's basically the exchange which currently used by Magento implementation. That's exchange which widely supported by IMQP. What is basically allowed? It's basically allow for each message to define in the pattern or like key code for this message, and then publish it, and then basically the message publishing with this key into the queue or like identifier, and then when the consumer is picking it up, it's know what to execute. Yeah, this pattern basically looks like points separated. So that's quite example, like this quick orange rabbit, that's a pattern of this queue. And that's also allow us to make it a little bit easier. So we have the topic names are generated automatically by Magento in web. Yeah, let's just a couple of steps behind. So we have a web API XML. Everybody know this file. It basically has this structure, which is defining the roles, the service, and the method here. Basically, two times method. That's method of service contract, and this method of the API. And this one, system automatically convert to the topic name, which looks like this. So async Magento is always prefix point, never changed. Then come in the catalog API, then come in the service contract itself. So basically, as you see here, we have Magento catalog API product repository interface. Okay, that was from another example, miss. But still, I guess you will get the point. So we have, for example, here, that's a service contract name. So we have Magento catalog API tier price storage interface. That's our service contract name. Then come in the method. That's here. As I told, sorry, that was from another example here. Oh, I didn't check this. And then come in the method of the API request. So post, it's all get in lowercase always and always dot separated. The dot separation, that's basically the practice or the requirement from the topic exchange of the IMQP. And then you publish basically the message by this topic name into the queue and defining the data for this message. So if you're talking about the tier pricing, that's a price array. If you're talking about the product repository, it's a product data, and so on. Also, one more important note, which I will not touch today again, because otherwise it will take an hours to talk about this. There is Magento Framework Message Queue Publisher interface, which has an operation publish, which is basically can be used not only by a single bulk API, it can be used by any implementation you develop in yourself in your extensions. So you can basically publish any message you want to the queue, and then create your own consumer that will process this. So that's basically done by all those implementations here. Expert processor, inventory using it quite widely. So this all are custom implementations which all used still the publisher interface and publish method of it. One more trick, or I would say not a trick, that's something you have to try. You can run multiple consumers at the same time. And to run the multiple consumers, you can basically just, I mean, first of all, you cannot do it with environment PHP file. You have to do it from the terminal. So you have to integrate it or in your deployment process or in create an automated script for that. But if you will do bin Magento Q consumer start, let's say shared catalog update price and add there then end in the end, then it will be run as a background and your terminal will not be blocked. So it just will start the process and then the terminal will be free again. So that basically will make you possibility to run 3, 4, 5, 10 consumers, let's say, for the product updates at the same time, which will make the process faster. So just imagine you have, I mean, if you receive the request, develop this extension, and it's multitask, basically. There's a lot of features which have to be developed. So basically, 5 developers will do this task much faster than only 1 developer. That's basically also a way of the multiple consumers. So the multiple consumers will execute the same amount of requests faster than 1 consumer because there are more workers basically. But you always have to be careful about deadlocks. Because if I'm talking about the complex updates like products, orders, customers, even stock, multiple consumers will work with the same tables at the same time, which may lead to deadlocks. So you always have to test this. Depends from the operation. And yeah, but basically that's all. You just have to test it and check if there are no deadlocks happening with your amount of load. Yeah, that's a little bit of tricks or tips and tricks, which I also want to share. You can basically split queues. So now all asynchronous requests are coming to the same queue, which basically you mean one queue where it has a huge row of the request. Let's say if you use it intensively, it's 1,000 of requests which are waiting that they will be processed. What if you want to split it? I mean, for example, if you split customers and products in the different queues, then you definitely can run multiple consumers and the processing will happen much faster. To do it, we just will go to the queue consumer XML of this module, basically. I mean, you don't need to change in the core. Don't forget Ben Marks, he will come to your dreams in the night. But you creating the queue consumer in your own implementation. That's the default one. Don't save it. You can find it in Magento core. That's how it looks like basically. So we defined only one consumer, which is sync operation all, which has connection MQP, and there is consumer interface here. But you can split, let's say, products and customer, and you're doing it in this way. So basically, you define in 2 other consumers, which another name, let's say, async operation products and async operation customers. And that's basically all other parts are the same. They're using the same consumer instance. They're using the same connection. And then you go into queue topology, which you also can redefine in your own extension, which by default looks like this. And by default, what is it doing? It's basically getting all topics with a sync point dash. So that's basically mean that everything which is coming after a sync point, all those topics will go to the same queue. So they will go to async operation all. And you just also redefine into different bindings. So you're telling that this particular topic, for example, async Magento catalog API product repository point will go to the async operations products queue. And let's say customer going to another queue. And with this not defined ending, I'm telling that it will work for all product repository interface implementation. So it will cover, let's say, put, post, delete, request, even the configurable products update. So everything which is basically starting from /v1/products. All those requests will go to those 2 different queues. And then you run into queues at the same, 2 consumers at the same time. So now you have async operation products and async operation customers. Quite important point, which I didn't mention here. Don't forget run setup upgrade, because queues are created on a step of setup upgrade script. Otherwise, you don't have a queues in RabbitMQ and you cannot process. So your messages will go somewhere and you will never know where. Yeah. Oh yeah, for 4 minutes. Why are we doing all this basically? That was one of my favorite slides, which I shared before on one of my presentations. That was the statistic from one of our customer project. And here on the left side, you see that's amount of requests to the system per day, basically. And we had load approximately in 50,000 requests per day, and they all executed asynchronously. And basically, I never knew how many of them. I just collected this data for show the presentation. Then I found out that there was 1.5 years ago, basically, that there was a peak on one day where there was 800,000 requests in one day came up. And you know what is best of all of this? That I never knew it. Me as developer, I had no idea there was so much peak, and nobody mentioned it. Not the customers, not the users of the website, no admins, no us developers. That was amazing, because if I would not have Async API here, then system would probably go down somewhere already on this step. And another example, that's basically the product save time. So if you're talking here, that there was request, which is basically mean the Magento accept your message but didn't execute it yet. Execution will happen later asynchronously. Then here was a performance measurement, how fast is a product creation. So that's basically don't mean that the data is coming faster into the system. That also means that the product creation itself was approximately 70% faster with bulk requests. So if you have a look, let's say sync and async, yes, async is faster, definitely still, but not so big difference. So it's about, I guess, 25% performance improvement, which is still awesome if you're talking about the big data in Magento. But that's green line, this is bulk request. It's basically our performance improvement, which is honestly amazing. And this happened because with one request to the bulk, you initialize the Magento only once. If you have, like this example, 1,000 of the products import, 1,000 requests in one body, this means you initialize Magento only one, push all messages, and then consumer, which is already in your memory, will execute them, and it's not spending time to initialize all this again and again. So the product creation process is also much, much faster. And also stability. That's what I told about. If you will start to send too many requests in the system at the same time, or have a too big load of the data, your system will start to throw you back 500 errors because of the deadlocks, because of the not enough resources, and so on and so on. And that was like example where from 500 requests, the amount of errors that started grow like tremendously, and basically almost each request started to come back with the 500 errors. But again, also with the bulk API, you have to be a little bit careful by the reason that you see here still some errors started, but that's line on the server configuration itself, though that's not about that there was not enough resources. No, resources more than enough. There was a server configuration. Here you have to take care about the amount of allowed processes at the same time, because when you publish the message asynchronously and you're not waiting for responses, the amount of requests may grow. This means each request take a single process, or single PHP FPM process in this case, and it can overload by the amount of processes. And also the body size. If you send in too big requests in one body size, the server may block you. So the Apache Nginx, whatever you're using, can just tell, hey, this body request is too big. So that's you have to take care about. Yes, that's basically all from my side. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed. And if you have any questions, you're welcome. Basically, I see here only one. How to handle error in bulk API. Example, some products have integrity constraint error in the mile of bulk API, how to handle. Yeah, that's basically what I told before. So if you're talking about the bulk API, when you send a request are processing, and there can be an errors, also integrity constraint errors. You have to request the statuses by the appropriate endpoints. Because, first of all, when you send a request, you don't know there is an error. The request is processed, all looks good. So basically, then you have to request the status of your operation. You're doing by the API endpoints I showed you. You can also find them on DevDocs. Then basically you will see that there is an error on some requests, and you can fix them and then resend the bulk if you want to. But that's all. If there is an error like integrity constraint error, or error, for example, on product save or customer save, that's nothing you can do with bulk API. With bulk API, you can only schedule and request the status. Then you know that there is an error. but error have to be then fixed on this particular request, which is already out of the API itself, because API is only the communication level on top. I hope I answered your question. Yeah, that's all. If anybody else, yes, there is one. Oh, cool. Can we set some kind of priority in queue? No, sorry, unfortunately not. They will be added in the queue in the same sort order as you added them. But as I told, also you can handle it by the splitting the queues into different queues. And in this case, you can basically all execute them in different time if you want to. So if you, let's say, if consumer is not running, queue is not executed. But unfortunately, you cannot define the sort order of each single messages. That's true. And that's quite nice idea. I'll think about this. Yep. Good. More questions? Is there any bulk order customer migration API? Any bulk order? Honestly, I'm not sure I get a question. I'll try to answer it. So basically, as I told, the bulk API is a communication layer on top. And if you want, let's say, import customers or migrate customer from one system to another by using bulk, you can just definitely use it in the same way as using Magento API. There are like no directly for customers special communication or integration flow. But again, yeah, if you want, if you can use usual REST API for importing the new customers, you definitely can use in the same way the bulk API, pack them in all requests, and then send them to the Magento, and it will handle it like a usual request. Then yeah, I guess I'm done.
Guys, like if you have any question, like probably you can use your Q&A in your bottom of your Zoom panel.
There is two more questions, and I can just take them over. Bulk API available for inventory? Yes. I mean, all post, put, delete, patch requests can be executed like a bulk. That's not really related to inventory itself. It's any. This basically means yes, inventory also covered. What will happen if both async and async requests try to do update the same table? You must probably will see the deadlock. Yeah, it's quite simple. That's all depends from a use cases, because there are requests which are not locked in the tables. Cannot tell you which one, but there are some. And if you have such operation that's an asynchronous request trying to update the table, I mean, you can also imagine that you have 20 admins which are sitting in Magento and changing the products, and at the same time 5 ERP systems are pushing product to the Magento. You may probably will also see sometimes the deadlocks that cannot be unfortunately avoided. It can be avoided if you will push the, let's say, also products update. Again, if you're talking about products, like a very common example, if you will push the product update also from Magento backend asynchronously. Unfortunately, not a standard in Magento. But for the big systems, it can be available. I mean, again, yeah, not standard currently, but so technically you still may see the deadlocks. What will happen if the boss is, wait, that was already, I guess there was one question which, no, okay. No, yeah, no. There was, can we have third-party API and async bulk calls? Yes. Basically, any API request which you develop with your extensions or the third party, if they basically using post, put, delete, patch request, then they're already a bulk and async. You can just, again, by adding the prefixes in the API request, you can execute them in both ways, in a synchronous way or in a bulk way. Yeah, that's all for now what I see.
Okay. Thank you so much, Lyzun, for your insightful session. So it was wonderful watching you. I know it was more technical as well. So I believe like the participants enjoyed and got an insight from your session. And no, like before ending this session, like I just want to have a sneak peek into the next Magento series, like who is the next master lined up for our Magento Master Virtual Series. Okay, so let me share my screen to see like who has been lined up for the sixth Magento Masters Virtual Series. So it's none other than Rafael Correa Gomes. He's a Magento Master of 2018, and he is an IT director at Lyzun. And he'll be talking about and he'll be shedding his lights on Magento 2 with zero downtime deployments. And Rafael was selected as a Magento Master for 2018 based on his 2017 contribution through organizing Magento meetups and contributing to the Magento 2 core and also Magento Dev Docs and GitHub, as well as his efforts for one of the awesome workers like he translated Magento 2 to Portuguese for the Brazilian community. So that was amazing. So, and thank you, Lyzun, and for your wonderful session, and thank you for honoring our stage.
Always welcome. That was a big pleasure. And again, as I told, if somebody interested in this project, also want to join and support me, you can find me on Magento community, just like.
Okay, that's great. Okay. And that's it. Looking forward to hosting another insightful session to you all. And thank you. And thank you, Lyzun, once again.
Always welcome. Bye-bye.